This afternoon, we're here to talk about the tech impact on the office market, on the commercial real estate industry in LA. It used to be a bit player. I think we can all safely say that this is a major force in the market that is changing not only the way that people are acquiring properties, but also developing them, marketing. The whole game has changed with the influence of tech tenants coming in. There are things to think about on the volatility side. There are things to think about in terms of how space is being gobbled up. We'll talk about all those, and then at the end, I'll open it up for about 10 minutes of questions. So I'm Hitan Simtani. I'm the editorial director of The Real Deal, and I just wanted to introduce our panelists now. So to our left is Pat McCroskey. Pat leads a team at CBRE that manages a portfolio of over 4.5 million square feet of office space, including the building we're in right now, the Water Garden, and 2000 Avenue of the Stars. Century Plaza Towers in Century City, and obviously hundreds of more buildings. So thank you for being here.
All the B product.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen. I told these guys to take the gloves off, so it's going to be fun. Next to him is Eric Brown. Eric is a senior vice president, recently crowned senior vice president, congratulations, at LBA Realty, the development team behind the redevelopment project of the former Sony Studios Plaza. It's now known as One Culver, and you might have heard of it because they just signed a pretty prominent tenant sitting right to the left. I know they can't talk about it yet because it's WeWork and all that, but I'm going to make them talk about it. So. That location is going to be home to WeWork and Equinox and many others. So welcome, Eric. Thank you for being here. To his left, John Slavitt. John is the managing director in the Western region for WeWork. I don't think WeWork needs too much introduction. Suffice to say that 5 years ago, it might have been a company that would have been, a couple of people in the market might have heard of it. Now it is worth on paper more than some of the biggest landlords in the country. If you ask John, I'm sure he's absorbed the ethos of saying, hey, we're not a real estate company, we're something else. So we're going to talk about that as well. John, welcome. And to his left is Ryan Smith, who oversees asset management on the West Coast for Hackman Capital. Hackman is obviously developing Culver Steps. The project, as The Real Deal reported a few weeks ago, is in advanced talks to land Amazon as a tenant.
Another deal we can't talk about.
Fair enough. And Ryan is obviously a landlord as well to the likes of Apple, and is among the pioneers, his company's among the pioneers of developing space that is catering to the tech industry. So why don't we start with the light stuff, right? We talked about this a little bit in the last panel, but I want to get your perspective as well. It seems like a lot of you are doing business that is directly intersecting with the tech industry. The tech industry is known, obviously, for these major companies that are massive employers and are bringing a lot of jobs to the region, but also for a little more volatility than we might have been used to in the market before. We're talking about companies that could have valuations of billions of dollars. A few months later, a series of incidents happen. They're either wiped out of the market, taking significant markdowns, putting a whole host of sublease space on the market. How are landlords and maybe operators gearing up for that change when you're dealing with an industry that is known for that? And I could be wrong about that, but let's hear about it.
Well, I'll give it a shot. We've been fortunate here at the Water Garden. And just a quick background, when this project was built in 1990 and 2000, it was two different phases, we were predominantly catering to the service firms, financial, law firms, all of that. Today, we're 95% media and tech. So we've taken that jump and just said, you know what, we're in Santa Monica, we're in Silicon Beach, this is where that type of tenant wants to be. So the challenges of that, hey, you got to go with the flow, right? But you got to understand what the tenant wants and what they're really looking for. One of the reasons that we did the improvements out here is because of the tech world and what those employees are looking for and how they're generating. But your question was, in terms of the volatility of these tenants, we've been very fortunate here. We've got the likes of CBS and Amazon and Oracle and Cornerstone On Demand and Sony. So we haven't had a lot of that. This market is very different, I think, than back in mid-2000s when it was such a volatile market. I mean, I was at a conference up in Silicon Valley a couple weeks ago, and the discussions were very similar to discussions that we're having here. And the discussions were, you got 5 players up there. It's Amazon, it's Oracle, it's Facebook, Apple, Microsoft. It's the same players, and they just keep expanding and expanding and expanding, and they've got this appetite for space that is just, I think you'll touch upon it later, but it's crazy. I mean, enough is not enough. I mean, you guys are seeing it in Culver City right now. So, we've been fortunate, but I guess to answer your question directly, what do we do with those tenants that are volatile? Sometimes you take a flyer. You just got to make sure that you're looking at the securitization. You got to make sure that they've got the right fundamentals and the right base and they got the right backing and that you believe in them and that they believe in you as the landlord. And, if the unfortunate situation comes back that you get the space back, you hope that they've built the right type of space so that it can be reused by another tenant in the market.
Ryan, you had an interesting counterpoint to that, right? When we talk about taking space back in the event of a calamity with the company.
Yeah, as at Hackman, and I'm sure as every landlord can say, we don't underwrite tenants. We do to a certain extent when they come to the table, but we underwrite real estate, right? So, when you brought this in the pre-discussion, I said I can think of 2 tenants right now I wish would go out because they're 40% under market, right? So I think when you're underwriting tenants, you're probably kind of venturing out into an ethos that you don't want to be in. So we underwrite real estate. And we think that if we have a good basis, if we monitor a tenant's build out, that it's not overly specialized, where if we get it back, it's just going to be a calamity. Like I said, I can think of 2 tenants right now that if they called me tomorrow and said that we're moving out, we would dance the jig. So we underwrite real estate. We believe in our markets. We believe in market fundamentals. So I think if you get totally overweighted in one tenant in one market, and some might say that at 350,000 square feet, we might be overweighted with Amazon in Culver City, but I just saw what Jeff Bezos is worth, so I feel pretty good about things. But we underwrite markets. We underwrite real estate, and we don't want to get in the business of underwriting tenants. And like I said, at some point you have to. But the Hackman playbook has been to develop large swaths of square footage, campus-like environments, and startup companies just don't take 100,000 square feet. So, maybe we can talk to Eric because he's probably doing it in little smaller bits and smaller bites and smaller chunks.
Let's talk to Eric then. Eric, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I think agree with everything that's been said. I think we'd like to. We do kind of like to dig in a little bit on a tenant's business. I think maybe a little different. We don't like to. We underwrite real estate too. At the end of the day, we don't want to consider ourselves. We don't want to be in a position where we need to be the expert on a tenant's business. That being said, we do like to gain a comfort level in a space that a tenant might be in. As an example, in Orange County, we've had some success. A recent tenant that IPO'd in the data analytics space. They've grown from 30 to 80,000 feet. When they were first in the market, we said we like their space, we like their people, and then we do like to bring in, to the extent we can leverage relationships we may have. Who are in the private equity venture capital business that might have an additional take on a given tenant or space. We like to gather as much information as we can. You said something about cell phones, didn't you? Yeah, thank you.
I think the panelists are exempt from the rule, but so I'll take only one strike off.
But hey, it's and we love the idea of getting a tenant to build out reusable space. I can't really say that I've experienced numerous examples where you get space back and the next tenant says, you know what, I'll take that. I think we say that that's a strategy more than it actually ends up coming.
I was just going to say one more thing. We've all seen pictures in magazines of what a creative office could be. Right, we've been guilty of it. What we built out for Beats and the Hayden tract was just something marvelous. But the average creative tenant, it's pretty wide open space. There's really, they'll have a section that's specialized, but for the majority of the space, pretty wide open, pretty reusable, pretty functional for our next tenant. Kind of an open canvas or blank canvas.
It's more cosmetic surgery than like a open heart thing.
Exactly.
And part of your creativity is in your ceiling, in your kitchens,
100%.
And your lobby.
The bones are the creativity. Yeah.
John, I want to bring you in as well, but I wanted to get a sense of the audience again, just so our panelists have an idea. How many commercial brokers at the moment? How many developers? Great. And how many people in the tech space in any way, whether supplier, provider? Okay, great. Okay. So John, You're dealing with a lot of, I mean, WeWork has moved a lot to enterprise clients as well. We'll talk about that. But you're also dealing with a lot of untested companies, right? Who might take a space. How quickly or how much of a cushion's built into your plan when you take in a tenant that says, hey, I'm the latest drone company delivering, I don't know, freshly made juice packets. I don't know, I'm just coming up with something, right? How much of...
You need that, by the way.
Well, there was a company called Jacero that did that with a $700
We know.
blender, and then you could squeeze it with your own hands. So, but how much of that are you guys doing when you see a tenant saying, okay, I don't think this business will be around in 3 months? Is that a concern for you?
No. But just to give you context, I think that we love great landlords. We love commercial brokers. It's a big, huge, amazing asset class that we're all participating in real estate, and there's just rising tide raises all boats in our view. So we view ourselves as a collaborator to really deliver great experiences for our members, and quite honestly, to de-risk the whole situation that we've just been discussing. When we go into a building and take 50,000 feet, 100,000 square feet, 200,000 square feet, and by the way, in 8 years, we've never handed the keys back. Our typical location's 90% occupied within 12 months or less, and so we kind of know how to do this now. So we can go to landlords and say, if you've got a 1 million square foot building, give us a quarter of it. We'll help you bring enterprises in. We'll make them really happy. But we're very diverse now because in a typical location in the West, the business that I oversee, we're a third enterprise now, probably about 30-40% smaller companies and 20-25% mid-sized companies. And the reason that we're good for landlords and we're good for those companies is we're flexible. If someone calls us and says, I need a spot for 50 people or 100 people or 200 people in LA tomorrow, we're going to find that for them. So we have a lot of demand right now that's coming to our platform, to our website, to our brand. And we can work with landlords to bring a great experience to their building, bring a lot of energy to their building, diversify the product that they've got to offer in that complex or in that building. And because we've got a lot of demand for the WeWork product now, we can, it's very diverse. So, if there's a startup that lasts for 90 days, that's too bad. We'd love them to last forever, but there's another startup tomorrow that could never get into that beautiful Class A building, but for coming into WeWork. There's another mid-market company that just raised a round that would never want to sign a long-term lease right now because they don't know how many employees they're going to have in 2 years, but they can come into WeWork. There's an enterprise company that is building out their headquarters, and they may be going into one of these guys' buildings in 2 years, but we can give them what they need in the meantime. So to us, it's a huge market, room for all of us to collaborate. And at the end of the day, if these companies are happy and successful, good for us, good for developers, good for landlords.
How many people here are actually working out of a WeWork right now?
They work with me.
Fair enough. So I understand, and I think we
all the brokers I want to talk to after we finish too. All the commercial brokers. Let's talk.
Well,
we can make a lot of money together.
Apparently, your boss said that he crushes brokers' balls. This is what I heard. But yeah.
Is that on the record?
This
somewhere?
is no, but it's.
Where did you get that?
We've got that.
Come on.
Come on.
You got to cite that.
Read
Fake
the real deal
news,
tomorrow.
Fake news.
Oh no, we can't start that. We can't go there. But I did want to say we understand the value aspect when you come into a building. You're essentially taking a lot of risk off the table for a landlord by taking such a large chunk of space
for a very long term as well.
You're also activating the space in WeWork's words to bring that building up to jazz it up a little bit, but you're becoming more and more of a quasi-competitor in some spaces because you're taking in an enterprise tenant. In New York, for example, you have IBM at 88 University Place. The entire thing is, the entire building, which is a WeWork managed building, is IBM. That is potentially a substitute for a landlord like these guys. So maybe, Ryan, you want to jump in and talk a little bit about any concerns, any red flags you see when you have a potential, you take in a WeWork, but eventually it becomes a direct competitor.
Certainly, if you're operating a multi-tenant building, I think I'd have concern. I mean, they're a great tenant, right? They're a draw. So maybe some of their competitors I might have a bit of an issue, and I certainly don't want to speak ill of them when they're sitting within arm shot of me, I should say, is not as earshot. But like I said, our playbook has kind of been large campuses and kind of a land grab, for lack of a better term, and building out large campuses. So probably wouldn't fit the WeWork model, although they toured through the Culver Studios. They looked at the mansion because they thought it might be a cool, kind of alternative motif that we could offer them and kind of just expand kind of what they kind of look at and spaces that they look in. It kind of would have been perfect for them at the time, although we envisioned someone coming in wanting to take all of it and not wanting anybody, even someone as cool as WeWork, being on the campus, and that proved to be right. So I think I would have concerns in a multi-tenant building. It'd be like, okay, they're taking 3 floors and we got 10 floors to go. The first 2 tenants that we might want to do a direct lease with go straight to them. I think that's a legitimate concern, although their sexiness, now their credit, the length of their terms probably trumps all of that. Especially if you have a lot of space to lease and they want to take 150,000 square feet of it, just go ahead.
Well, just to, so I think the way we view it, are there scenarios where we could find ourselves competing with the WeWork in our campus? That's certainly a possibility. That being said, and this is just a recent example, I had a tour yesterday with a tenant who's a production company that needs 10,000 feet. They have writers that they often need to find space for a short term. And the tenant says, well, shoot, my writers can now take space for 90 to 180 days at a time in a WeWork. That's a perfect scenario for us. It makes our building more attractive to that tenant who's going to sign a 5 to 7 year lease, because they can leverage as sort of shorter term swing space potentially the WeWork in the building. So we actually we see it as more as a positive. And shoot, if Amazon is in our building via a WeWork lease for 2 years because they're waiting for Ryan to finish the campus, that doesn't bother me having Amazon in our building and having them using our amenities, and because maybe eventually Ryan runs out of space and they need to take.
That would bother me.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, please.
So listen, in a zero-sum view of any market, there's more, the more zero-sum the view is of the market, the more perception there's of competition. I love the way you just framed it, which is there's huge demand. We have the hottest cities in North America all in the West, in terms of where people want to live, where they want to work. And I think that one of the insights that our founders of our company had is that the trends around where and how people work are changing. We all need to kind of respond to those trends. Right now, in any sort of CBD, you might have 1% be co-working right now, right? The WeWork space, maybe 2%, maybe 1/3%. But it's going to be growing significantly over the next 10 to 20 years. I think that it could be more like 10 to 20%, whether it's creative or co-working or shared space. So if the market's going that way, we all need to work together to provide that. And if that's what companies want, flexibility, great experience, for their employees, to attract and retain the future leaders of corporate America who are millennial demographic, we need to give them the product that they want. And if we have a rising tide raises all boats kind of mentality, that we have them now, they may outgrow. We have companies that outgrow WeWork all the time because we don't have the right building for them. We'll hand them back to the broker who brought them to us. We do it every day. So again, I think that it's a big world, it's a huge asset class. We have to recognize, what does the customer want? They want creativity, flexibility, experience for their people. And that's why this is becoming increasingly a CHRO, CEO, CFO decision, not just the head of real estate. It's about experience and retention, and they want to deliver that to their people, and it's just, that's changing.
But I want to get the broker sort of side of that as well.
What a great advertisement for WeWork, huh? Can we just keep talking about you? I'm kidding. The jury's been out for us for a while. We've got 1.5 million square feet here. We got another 3.5 million square feet in Century City. But I think if you look at what's happening, the difference between you guys and an executive suite operator is coming in when the market's bad and you got sublease space and you're discounting at 50%. You guys aren't asking that. You guys are paying full rate, market rates. So I think that's a big distinctive factor that's a positive. We had a tenant, a very prominent tenant that was in the market that was looking at us and spending a lot of time with us, and we thought we had the opportunity to make the deal. What they needed, though, was flexibility, and they needed short-term space.
Are we talking Amazon again?
I don't know. Can we even talk about Amazon?
I don't know how many
Do
NDAs
they
you
even
guys have signed.
exist? Yeah. And the challenge was we couldn't accommodate them because we didn't have space that had the finishes that they were looking for. And candidly, we weren't really interested in doing a 2-year deal. I mean, it just doesn't make a lot of sense for us. And they ended up going to you guys down in Santa Monica. So, you know, if we had had you in the project and we were able to keep that tenant, I think it's a positive. My view of real estate is if we can get a tenant in here and understand what we do on a day-to-day basis and what we provide the tenant from our service standpoint, from our amenities, from the quality of the project, that tenant, 9 out of 10 times, they're going to figure out a way to stay here. So if they're with you and they grow out of this space, hopefully they become a tenant of ours in the future. So I see it as a future. My daughter is just started back in New York, and I was asking her about her office space, and she goes, "Oh, I'm in the greatest office space. I can't believe it." I said, "Well, what is it?" And she goes, "It's a WeWork." You know, so it's happening. You know, this isn't a fly-by-night. This is it's kind of the future, and I think it's a positive, and I think it's got a good vibe for the projects.
We champion WeWork being in, so I don't want to sound like I'm poo-pooing it. My concern is this, in a red hot market, everything works, right?
Sure.
Air balls go in. So my concern is when the market's not so hot, if we do see a softening, and make no mistake, we are in a red hot market. They opened their second location in a city that's not so big, right? Or we're only saying 1.5, 2. Can we say you have
Probably
2
6,
locations in
but
Culver
we
City
don't-
now?
yeah.
But so we are in a red hot market. My concern is when I'm trying to lease a floor and my broker comes up to me and says, okay, one Culver's asking $4 net, but they're also asking $3.50 net. And I say, wait, what? Well, we got 2 landlords at one Culver now. So how's that going to work? How's that going to play out? Right now, it works perfectly. And I hope the playbook just continues to work. It's 2 landlords in one building. So we would love to have them as a tenant. It's just, how does that dynamic work?
Pat, I wanted to bring it back to you just because you're dealing with multiple landlords and looking at space from an interesting perspective. We had chatted, I believe, about Oracle and how they went from, I chatted with you, gone from 35,000 square feet to 175,000 square feet in 12 months. How do you even plan for that exponential growth in a portfolio? And then maybe on landlord level, if you guys could speak to that. This isn't, steady, slow and steady
Right.
growth. This is just leaping from one sort of space requirement to something completely different, the latter of which would require rejigging, buying out, relocating, many things. How do you deal with that?
Well, it's a puzzle, and you're talking about the Oracle deal that we did here a year and a half ago, and when they approached us, they came in and said, we need 45,000 square feet and we want to do a 4-year deal. And not only that, but we want expansion or ROFOs for the rest of the tower and this and that, and I mean, it was crazy. But when Larry Ellison is looking at you saying, we want to be here, you try to figure it out.
You just want to go racing with them, I think.
That too. So you got to figure it out. Is it easy? No. But if there's a will, there's a way. And with a tenant like that, you're going to figure it out pretty quickly. And we were lucky. They went from 45,000 square feet, and within a year time, we thought they were a little bit unrealistic because when they came to us, they said, we could be a 200,000 square foot tenant. We don't know when. We're coming into this market new. We want to get our feet wet, but if we make a mistake here, we want to be able to get out, and that's why it was a 4-year deal. Well, we structured it from the standpoint that said, okay, we'll play your game. We'll do a 4-year deal with you, and we'll give you your 45,000 square feet. We were very fortunate in that we had a tenant in place that was relocating and moving out, and that we could backfill, and they were a staggered move out. And it's a chess game, it's a puzzle, right? And so we looked at it, and long story short, within a year they took over the entire building, 175,000 square feet. Now that did require, because of how fast they moved, the relocation of some tenants, which is never a fun thing to do. But you got to do what you got to do.
As a broker, is there opportunity, I mean, you're obviously a landlord advocate in your position, but is there an opportunity to see, okay, they're not going to fit in my current client's portfolio, can I place them somewhere else? Is there deal flow based on that?
I'm not sure I completely
Sure,
understand.
so the question, I guess, is you're dealing with a landlord and it doesn't look like they're going to be able to accommodate that tenant. You somewhat have an inside track then to place them in another client's building.
Well, am I going to move a tenant that is interested in my project, but I can't accommodate them and turn it over to Eric or somebody else? Is that what you're saying?
Well,
That'd be
another
great,
building.
by the way.
Yeah.
What's that?
That would be great. It seems like a good idea, yeah.
Just trying to think of opportunities.
Let me put it this way. I'm going to do whatever I can do to make every deal that I've got on the table, period, right? I don't know if I'm answering your question, but if that tenant can't stay here, I hope they stay in Santa Monica, right? Because the more that these great tenants continue to expand in our marketplace, the better off we all are. And once we take large blocks of space off, we can continue to push the market. But as we've all seen, this is what continues to happen in our marketplace. Santa Monica gets to 2 or 3% vacancy like it does every 4 years, and they've got to look at alternative options, right? And thus, all of a sudden, like this past year, Culver City was the recipient of, however many hundreds of thousands of square feet that you just leased, 500,000 square feet. The great news about that is, other than your next 250, which will probably go, Culver City's pretty much done in some of your project, but you'll fill that up quickly. So that's going to be done. And then we're going to see that cycle come back around here to Santa Monica, and we're already seeing it right now. The activity that we've had in the first 2 months of this year has been so much better than what we saw in the last quarter of 2017.
That's an interesting point, just based on...
Well, just to tag on
Yeah, go
to
ahead.
Pat's point, I mean, Yahoo has a big presence here some years back.
Right.
They move out, that opens up an opportunity for Hulu, or the next tenant that's grown probably beyond, Yahoo's not in a growth mode now. So I think
Right.
turnover in a submarket can be a good thing too.
There's no question about that. I mean, the tenant that I was talking about was Edmunds.com that was in our project, but we couldn't accommodate what they needed, and so they ended up moving across the street to Boston Properties. If that was a painful loss, right? But if that deal didn't happen, we never would have made the Oracle deal. So it does create opportunities. And now, across the street, they're 95, 96% leased with great tenants. Well, those great tenants are going to need places to go, Hopefully it's to us. We're across the street. Hopefully it's to, whoever.
Ryan and I think you guys should be kind of around the $7 mark here in between those two projects. But eight.
I think it's an interesting point because on our earlier panel with the developers, they were talking about how there's such a major lag between, buying the site and actually getting things in motion to develop the site. So when you talk about Culver City maybe being done, hitting a wall at some point, and then waiting, there'll be maybe a 4 or 5 year lag before it comes back as another market. That's something that hasn't been addressed on the city level. Once it is, maybe there'll be less of a shift between the...
I just think it talks about the strength of the Southern California market. You look at Culver City, you look at Playa Vista, you now look at, crazy, the Westside Pavilion in, off of Pico and Westwood Boulevard that Hudson Properties is taking down that will either become a studio or, creative office space. So all these markets keep expanding. Right. And we're bringing, it's not like they're being backfilled by tenants that we don't know. They're all being backfilled by the cream of the crop tenants. And I think that says something for our Southern California market and how strong it's going to be and continue to be.
John, I think you have a very interesting perspective on, just based on your position on housing that I don't think necessarily people think about when they think about WeWork, but I think you guys have exposure to a lot of young companies, a lot of growing companies, and you're seeing a lot of their workforce up close. They're maybe in an environment they're talking about their housing needs. The previous panel talked about this major gap, major void in the market where we're catering to the have-nots, and we've got some luxury housing. But that middle-class housing, and now middle-class, I mean, the goalposts have shifted. We're talking 60,000 to maybe even 100,000 a year in income. What are some of the pain points that you might have heard of in your position?
Well, I mean, just talk to any young professional moving into a city in the West about what it's like to, if you're earning in that range after taxes, what it's like to move in, because a lot of our West cities have a lot of influx of great young talent. What it's like to come into a city and find a community of people, of peers, assuming you've got your gig, your job, and so where do you live? I was talking to a colleague earlier who just moved out to San Francisco. She's got a 1-bedroom with her boyfriend. I said, what are you paying, $3,500? She said, no, closer to $5,000. Right, this is San Francisco. This is not in the ritziest neighborhood. This is a new development that's on sort of Market and 10th maybe. So it's kind of like in a bit of an edgy neighborhood, new product, but $4,800 a month for 1 bedroom. So it's crazy. So I mean, we have a new venture called We Live that some of the people in the room may have heard about. We have the first one downtown on Wall Street. We have another one in Virginia. We announced a 400,000 square foot tower that we're building, that a developer that we partner with is building in Seattle. It's both we live and we work in one tower with all the amenities you would need to have an amazing experience, food and bev and wellness and social. You could literally wake up, spend your whole day, heck, you might not leave the building for a month and have an amazing experience. So I think that, young professionals want something that's, they don't need a ton of space, but they want great design, pay a market price, but get a lot more for that price in terms of amenities and experience. Right?
You found that premium is working out because it
so
is.
Our price for the first 2 We Lives is kind of market price for really good product in that city, but what you get is a much fuller experience. So if you want to reserve, the chef's kitchen to do a big party with your peers down the hall, you can reserve that. If you want to attend the yoga class, that's upstairs. If you want to go to the mailroom that turns into a nightclub at 8 p.m., which we have at 110 Wall Street, New York, which is actually really cool, you go get your mail and go have a drink at the bar, really, that's a part of your experience. So you're paying market rate, probably a slightly smaller space, living with a couple people in sort of a micro apartment environment, but an amazing experience and an instant community. Just add water. You go to New York, you're new, and you've got the experience. So the other thing I would say is that big companies need this too. Big companies have a lot of young talent or middle-aged talent in a city, and what they've done is cobbled together all kinds of buildings around a city or an urban area, and they have their people kind of walking like their urban campus in between buildings. So we're looking at ways of helping those companies solidify those experiences into fewer spaces with better amenities. So, we've got a health club concept we've launched called Rise by We that we've got in New York, and we're going to do one at Salesforce Tower. We're looking at food and bev. We're looking at ways of enhancing the experience.
And then on the landlord side, you're picking up a lot of these things as well and incorporating them into your portfolios, correct? You're looking at space in a little bit of a different way, putting more emphasis on certain amenities and taking things out that are just, I guess, have been par for the course for a long time, but doesn't seem like they're as valuable anymore.
On our tour, if some of you joined us, this was called the Water Garden because we had a 500,000-gallon lake outside. And it was beautiful, but 90% of the outside area that we had was not usable space. I guarantee you one of the reasons that we got Oracle here is because we were under construction at the time for the outside, and Larry saw the vision, and he said, this is what I want for my employees. What we've done out here now is 90% of that outdoor area is now usable space, and we've tried to create different little environments throughout, whether it's be for your fitness, or if you want to play foosball and ping pong, or your eating area, or your fire pit and coffee area. These young millennials, or these millennials, they spend more time at their office now than they do at home. So you've got to provide them with something different and something that they want to stay in. So when they get up in the morning, they go, hey, I'm looking forward to going to where I work. And that's what we've really tried to provide here. And, it's paid off. You look at the tenants that we have here now, the Amazons, the Oracles, the CBS, all of those. Every day we hear it, and you see it at lunchtime, when the park is absolutely full out here. So it's critical. And, the challenge is there's not a lot of developments that have the mass or the area where you can do this. We've been very fortunate here, and we're fortunate in Century City at the towers that we've got, the lawn area and that outdoor experience so that you can create that indoor-outdoor vibe.
And Eric, if you're doing it on a smaller scale where you might not have the ability to completely, design something, what sort of changes have you made?
Well, I think we really like to think about the way people are working today, and it's similar to what Pat's saying, and maybe a different version of what John's saying. People want to, I think, certainly the younger workforce, they want to come to work, they want a great office space, a beautiful space to work, but they also really enjoy alternative places to work within a similar building or environment. So we focus a lot of times on two things. One, we want a project or you know, we have a project in Orange County. It's on 100 acres. It's a couple million feet. It has that scale, and we've got, you know, 8 or 9 restaurants, and we have very walkable amenities. We'll be creating walkable amenities in Culver City too, and that's part of what we like about Culver City is beyond what's in our project. You know, Ryan's going to have amenities. There's amenities all through downtown. So finding a project with walkable amenities we think is really important. But then we also really like to take a really hard look at how do we make the common areas of the project, the lobby space, like if we just commissioned today, in fact, a 70-foot wide LED media wall in our project in the lobby in Culver City. It's amazing. We'll have music in there. We'll have probably seating for a couple hundred people. You know, of course, Wi-Fi. There's balcony areas that the tenants will be able to use. So my point is, you know, someone's going to have an office on the 4th floor, but then they're going to find 3 different areas within the building where they can have meetings, where they can work privately, where they can sit down and have lunch. So we like to put a real focus on creating kind of a holistic environment that provides lots of optionality within a given building.
I want to zoom out a little bit since we're talking about a tech panel and just get your takes as professionals that are intersecting with the tech industry on valuations today. We're seeing, and John, I'm not going to get to you right away, so don't worry about that, but valuations are at levels that I don't think have been seen in a long time. Just from your perspective, are these numbers sustainable? If they're not, is there going to be a happy medium that we're going to reach? Is there a level that makes sense that would allow you to do business, but not be as, I don't know, I heard about WAG, for example, getting a $300 million infusion. Just your perspective on tech valuations from the outside.
I'll not to take too much time here, but I did a BizNow panel a few years ago talking about how...
What's that? Sorry, I haven't heard that word
sorry.
before. Yeah.
And the similar question was asked, and I talked about how I couldn't understand how Facebook's paying $20 billion for WhatsApp and that their market cap was like $150 billion, which was at the time maybe the same as JP Morgan. Well, now Facebook's market cap is like $500 billion. So I guess that's one way of answering your question that I'm probably not qualified to answer your question. You know, look, I think probably if just from a macro perspective, PE ratios are very high in the stock market. They're probably going to pull back at some point. It's probably going to have a major impact on the tech industry, but I'm not the expert.
Ryan, you're shifting in your seat.
I have a different way of saying exactly what Eric said. Michael and I, Michael Hackman, our chief executive and founder, we have a little saying that we've correctly predicted 20 of the last 3 recessions. So if you ask us, we have no idea where the market's going. We think it's going to fall down tomorrow. So we scurry to get these leases signed, and we've been fortunate enough to have large swaths of space go to large tenants. So if you ask me, I'm not underwriting the 2 large tenants that we've signed deals with. We don't need to underwrite them. We think their credit's pretty good for the foreseeable future. I will say that tech has a wider range of definition than it did just a month ago, and certainly a year ago, and certainly 5 years ago. So the 2 tenants that we have done business with, we're doing them they're not manufacturing hardware in this space. They're actually, and that's where these people made their hay. You know, now you get tenants like Apple where they used to develop and manufacture the conduit in which you consume things, and now they're developing the product that you are consuming on their product.
Distribution channels as well.
Yeah, so you're seeing this convergence, and when we bought the studios, we bought 15 acres because we thought it was a good land play, and we didn't know that 4 years ago that Northern California tech would be merging with Southern California media and creating this titanic boom, and all these particles would burst out, and we were able to land 2 of the bigger asteroids in a couple of our properties. So I'm not underwriting tech properties. I'm fortunate not to have to do that. We're looking at other properties where we might have to in the future. We're underwriting media. We're underwriting content, and I see my kids, how they consume things and what they consume them on, and it's a different market. So tech has expanded its definition. So I don't know if tech has a bubble because tech seems to find other avenues to become tech. So that's...
Yeah, I'll add. I think that, listen, my brother's a venture capitalist and has been doing it for 12 years, and we're best friends. We talk every day, and we talk through his deals, and we actually did a couple startups together. And so the cruel math for startups is that even the startups funded by the top 10 venture firms globally, 80% of them amount to nothing. So if a $1 billion fund is, which is a fund on the larger side, is investing $20 million in 50 companies, which is the typical distribution over 2 years, out of those 50 companies, 40 will amount to nothing. 1 or 2 will be worth $1 billion, and then the rest will be worth maybe $100 million. And the 100 million outcomes are not material to the big VCs. It's the couple billion. So the cruel math is hope springs eternal for entrepreneurs. I mean, I feel I am one and I was one. And the reason that there's always a soldier standing behind the soldier who fell is because there's that passion and drive to create. So that's the cruel math. And that's why I think, if I'm sitting on the landlord side, you want to be diverse. And I think where we can partner and help with landlords is that because a third or more of our member mix are those startups who are growing and dying and recreating and going through that cycle, we can provide that product within a building. And we have that flexibility. And so it really, in that sense, is a win-win.
I think John's comment about diversity is the key, right? You made a comment earlier that if there's a 1 million square foot building, you'd like to take down 250,000 square feet of it. We don't have an appetite for that. But if you come to us and say we want 50,000 square feet or 60,000 square feet, we're all in, right? So it's diversity, and it's protecting your downside.
So the headlines with these valuations don't freak you guys out too much. Okay.
I got other stuff freaking me out,
It's fair enough.
But just one last comment on diversity, just as it relates to our market here in LA. I saw a data point the other day that, of the net new jobs created in our broader market here the last couple of years, that roughly a third of those are in the technology space. Where I'd be a little scared from a diversity standpoint is like you go to Seattle, this same report quoted that number at 94%. That's a pretty startling number of percentage of office jobs. You look at the new construction, and believe me, we would love to own more in Seattle. But with the new construction in Seattle, their base is going to increase by near 10% in the coming years. And here in LA, we're looking at an increase in our base of a couple percent.
I guess you could break that a little further more and see, out of those tech jobs, how many are that one massive company that essentially is such a big catalyst?
Yeah,
for
no,
employment.
sure. So,
Right.
do any of us have any reason to believe that Amazon's going to start shrinking in the near future based on the cardboard I break down every day? I would say no, but that's another job I have that we can talk about another time.
I have that job. I know that job.
I do want to open it up to questions. We'll take a couple from the audience. Just one request. Please just ask one question and let it be a question.
We've recently seen in Venice a company which is doing on paper and by all regards very well, be rebuffed politically from the community in which it's leasing all of this real estate. Are you guys seeing communities dig their heels in a similar way? And how is that going to affect the market going forward?
That's a great question. Really cool.
I think we're seeing the opposite where we are. I mean, we're seeing an embracing of the technology market. I think Venice is its own animal. If you've ever met my brother who lives in Venice, he is his own animal. But I understand. I know that the company you're talking about, and obviously they have their own culture, and they continue to grow and grow and grow and swallow buildings that weren't swallowable, but because they paid a big number. And I think that led to maybe an attitude that kind of pervades the entire community and kind of rubs some people the wrong way. But that's Venice. So you're talking about Culver City, probably a little bit more of a accepting community. We like to call it like Mayberry, right? Because it's got its own fire department, own police department, own school district, right? I mean, these are all things that these big companies embrace. These companies that, it's just for us. We started talking to Amazon 3 years ago when they were 75,000 square foot unnamed tenant, and when we signed them at under 400,000 square feet, for a super long term. I mean, these are dynamic, forward-thinking companies. We signed the lease 6 months in advance of our entitlements. Okay, so this is not our tenant. This is our partner, right? So I think the tenants that we're dealing with, certainly WeWork, just by virtue of you being here and listening to you and having talked with you over the last few days, these are companies that integrate within the community. They don't just lease space and want to capitalize on that space. So I think that coin kind of fell right on not one side. So I think there's a little bit of both parties to blame, and again, that environment. So Culver City, I don't know if you were here, but Mayor Cooper spoke here today, very embracing of these tenants. I'm sure there will be some growing pains, but as I said on a panel, and I don't need to quote myself, but growing pains are better than contraction pains, right? So we'll get through them. Obviously, right now, Tom Wolf is here. We got a lot of construction going on. You're about to wrap up. We're anxious for you to get going and deliver your space to the market. We're going to follow up with the Culver Steps at 115,000 square feet, and then the 600,000 square foot Gorilla will come a couple years after that. Tom and Ivy Station. We're super excited. Culver City's super excited. And I think it's a community that it's going to embrace these tenants, and I think the tenants are going to embrace the community. And that's huge, because you can't fake authenticity. We try to do it in our buildings every day and cut corners, and we fail. So we're paying the freight now.
WeWork, you know, your business plan is sort of like SNL's in the late 80s. You're leasing long-term and subleasing short-term. What happens if, God forbid, there's a catastrophic drop in rental rates and there's a discrepancy between what you're paying and what you're getting in? What happens then?
Yeah, I mean, appreciate the question. We've been asked that many, many times over the last few years. I think there are a bunch of ways to answer that, and I'll throw a few out and keep it short and sweet. We're very diverse globally now, so most of the new buildings we're opening are not in North America going forward. So increasingly diverse, very diverse cities, very diverse markets. Increasingly diverse in terms of our member mix. As I mentioned, my business in a year will be half enterprise. These are not month-to-month deals. I think that the other part of this is that I've been a startup CEO. One failed, one succeeded, and I sold to a public company. So I've been from 10 people to hundreds of people, and made the decision from the startup CEO side about what kind of lease I wanted to commit to. And if WeWork were around back when I had raised my last venture round, what I would have done instead of signing a long-term lease when I'm young and less proven is I would have gone into WeWork to see how things went. So, and that's why we have that segment of our business. So I think that when it comes to flexibility and risk mitigation, a diversity of types of companies will look to us as that kind of solution in a downturn, which is how WeWork started. In 2010, when the company started, it grew out of the Great Recession, mostly for startups who wanted a flexible option and didn't know how many employees they would have in 6 or 12 months. But if you're the CFO of a big public company, and there's a downturn, are you gonna sign really long-term leases all around the world when you don't know how many people you're gonna have in 2, 3, 4, 5 years in those cities? You're gonna think twice.
I want to thank you all for coming and listening. You've been a really engaged and interesting audience. Thanks, Eric, John, Ryan. Thank you guys. Thanks so much.